Hello, everybody. My name is Frank Rodriguez. I'm a coach with the Forge Your Trail program. Thank you for joining us today and listening to or viewing our Forge Your Trail podcast. Forge Your Trail is a program made possible by a grant from Adult and Family Services and through Oklahoma Child Support Services. Our mission is to provide educational resources and support services for Oklahoma parents with a focus on helping fathers improve their relationship with their children. We also teach a parenting class called On My Shoulders that is free of charge for participants. To learn more about our programs and upcoming class sessions, please visit our website, forgeyourtrail.com. Today, our guest is Kortni Torralba. Kortni Torralba is a special education teacher with the Moore Alternative School and Treatment. Thank you for joining us today, Kortni.
Thank you for having me.
Very glad to have you here. Can you share a bit of your background and tell us what led you to specialize in special and alternative education in Oklahoma?
Sure. This is my 25th year teaching. My background is in special education. I have a master's degree. I also have a master's in school counseling. So what really led me into special education was I initially really wanted to work with children with emotional behavioral disorders. That's my area of specialty. I really enjoy that kid that's a different learner, that really does not do well in the typical classroom. So you kind of have to think outside of the box. It requires a lot of creativity, a lot of to really be able to service that kid, and a great sense of humor. That's really key. And I have just found in my 25 years of teaching, and I've done several things in that time. I've taught special education. Special education has changed quite a bit even in those 25 years. So we've moved toward non-categorical, and I'll explain a little bit about what that means. But in that 25 years, I've also taught theater. I've taught several different categories of special education. But right now I'm back to my love, which is working with kids with behavioral and emotional disorders.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit more about that? What qualifies as behavioral or emotional disorders?
Sure. So the key with emotional behavioral disorders, and this is becoming a lot more common today with kids that we have in our society. We have a lot more kids with mental health issues. So these are kids who cannot function in the classroom due to their behavior to emotional. So this might be kids that have outbursts. These might be kids that have attendance issues. These might be issues with depression, just self-regulation. And they often require a separate setting sometimes, a special education classroom to go to. They certainly need some kind of a monitor, somebody to monitor their load and to look at their classes and see how they're doing. Sometimes it even requires a specialized program, which is what I teach in. So those things are a lot easier sometimes to integrate those kids into the typical classroom when they're in elementary. As they get older, it gets more difficult. And that is mainly because the academic gap grows. So what happens is when you're a third grader and you are misbehaving in the classroom and you can't really do the work, right? So you ask the teacher for help, you try, and you think to yourself, man, if I can't get the work done, I can at least have a good time. So they misbehave. And we try to assist that child within the typical classroom, within the regular classroom at that age in third grade. But then if we get to middle school and they have not gotten the assistance they need, suddenly what you have is a seventh grader who still reads at the third grade level. Now it's really hard to integrate them into the typical classroom because they're getting so far behind. And each year they get further and further behind, and they get angrier and angrier, and their behavior gets worse and worse. So typically by the time they reach middle school or high school, we start looking at specialized programs and pulling them out.
So do you teach in a middle school? Or is it all ages?
So the program that I teach in, Mass serves middle school and high school students. And we serve a total of 18 students. And they're all served within two classrooms, but they're served mixed. So we serve our junior high and our high school students together.
Okay. So can you tell our listeners, how do you define special and alternative education, and what distinguishes it from a more traditional classroom?
So, special education is a federal definition, and so a student who is a special education is on an IEP, an individualized education plan. And so, what happens is that a special education team meets, and this is comprised of a regular education teacher, a special education teacher, and an administrator. And they meet, and the parent, and you're meeting, and you want to talk about where is this kid at, right? What are they doing? How are they doing? And how are they doing as compared to a typical peer, right? And where are the deficits? Where are their strengths? How can we best serve this kid? There are 13 categories within special education. So you have emotional behavioral disorders. You also have kids with cognitive impairments. You have deaf, blind, learning disabilities, autism. So you have a whole range of deficits that kids can fall into. And oftentimes what you find is that they might fall into more than one. So, for example, other health impairment would fall under ADHD. Kids with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder would fall under other health impairment. But, we oftentimes have kids that have ADHD and a learning disability. So they have these comorbid disorders. So we look at what's their primary disability. How can we best serve them? Alternative education is slightly different. So alternative education is simply a program that's offered typically within the school setting. And all it is anything that is not the typical program. So our alternative education has a cap on the number of special education that they can serve. Because the idea is this: special education kids have special education programs to serve them. Alternative educations are there for typical kids who are not well served in the special education classroom, but are not special ed. So they're served through the alternative school system. So you do have special ed kids in the alternative school system, but the alternative school system is really meant for typical kids who they aren't functioning in the typical classroom either.
So how does a special, how does a special education program or an alternative education program, how do they differ from a normal?
So really what's happening here is it's really about meeting the unique needs of the child in both situations. You're really tailoring what is that child's unique needs. So the first thing that you're going to find are smaller classrooms because you need to be able to provide attention to that kid. So you have a smaller classroom setting. You're getting to know those kids. You often have less movement. So for example, in our alternative high school and within the more public school systems, our high school has 4 teachers within it and it serves 60 students for the alternative high school. That is far less than the regular high school. We have 3 high schools within Moore, and the high school typically has 2,200 kids within it. So 60 kids is a lot less. At 60 kids, I know those kids. I'm able to know their routine. I'm able to know things about them. You're able to gauge a lot. This is where you're really able to know when a kid comes in and I go, man, there's something really different about this kid. They're acting differently. They seem kind of off today. You were able to consult and talk with the other teachers and go, did you notice this behavior? Did you see Sam do this today? And, find some adjustment to say, how about we, modify his schedule or we pull him back into lab, maybe see if we can help him a little bit. So really that's what both special and alternative ed is about, meeting those individual needs of those child and making sure that they get whatever it is that they need.
So how does the family become involved in the creation of a special education program for
an IEP? I have to tell you, I know a lot of parents are really intimidated by the IEP process. And my biggest thing that I really encourage parents is to become a part of that team. You are an essential part of the team. I would dare say you're the most important member of that team because you know your child more than anyone else. And you know what that kid needs and you know him better than anyone. So remember that you are the expert on your child, more so than anybody else there. And so while I always say, and I always tell parents this, I'm the expert on learning and how on the classroom, but you're the expert on your child. I can't tell you. There's so many questions I need to ask you about what your kid needs and how they learn. And so I really need that parent to bring that information there. If you are dealing with a special ed team that you feel isn't really probing and asking that information of you, offer that information. The other tip I have is never go alone. My own son is on an IEP for speech. And I do not go to an IEP meeting alone. I don't want to go to an IEP meeting alone because even with all my experience and expertise, it's intimidating. You're talking about your child and your child at their weakest moment. And that's really vulnerable as a parent. It's really hard to talk about your kids' weaknesses. Even though we're talking about their strengths too, it's vulnerable to talk about their weaknesses and what they need and to feel like I'm in a position where I'm relying on the school system to be able to try to fill that gap. So bring somebody with you that is somebody that you can trust, that you feel like has your back. And you are not required by any means, right? You can bring anybody you want to an IEP meeting. Where the law states that the school has to inform you who's at the meeting, you are not, as the parent, under any obligation to inform the school who you're bringing. So you can bring anybody you want. Bring several people if you want, right? And make sure that you have somebody that's there on your team. So participate, have an advocate there for you, and offer as much information as you can about your child. And don't, under any means, if you don't feel comfortable with the process, if you don't feel comfortable with what's happening, speak up and say, I just don't really understand this. I don't, what is it I'm signing? What is it we're doing? Because ultimately you are creating a plan for your child for the year. The other thing to know is this: even though you sign an IEP, and an IEP is good typically for a year, you make a plan for a year. If you ever feel like things aren't going right, you can call for an IEP meeting, right? Even if we had an IEP meeting last month, I go, things aren't going well. So I'd like us to reconvene another IEP meeting and talk about something's still wrong. And we need to look at it. And we either need to change the modality of instruction, or we need to change the place of delivery, but something needs to happen because my child is failing 3 classes, or my child is coming home every day crying. But what we've tried it for a month and it's not working. So you are okay. Don't suffer in silence, right? Feel free to call another IEP meeting and say, I'd like to reconvene the team to talk again.
I personally did not know that was an option.
Absolutely. And a lot of parents don't. They give you a copy of your parent rights at the beginning of the meeting. Take them, read them, right? They are your rights. You can call as many IEP meetings as you want.
Okay. So can you explain to me how and when a child is identified as maybe having special needs or maybe needing an alternative education system?
So typically, special needs are typically identified in elementary, because this is, again, when you really first notice there's a difference in learning. The biggest gap comes for kids right around 3rd, 4th grade when we talk about learning disabilities. When we talk about some of the more obvious disabilities like cognitive impairment or autism, you're going to probably see that. You might even see that service through Head Start, right, through early intervention. But learning disabilities, other health impairment like ADHD, a lot of times that doesn't show up until 3rd or 4th grade. And that's right about the time, right, we start to really focus on academics in the classroom. And we really start to focus on literacy. And again, what you see are kids are working and they're trying, and suddenly they go, I just don't understand this. And the teacher, oftentimes, there's a lot of responses. And this is really where I see the development or the beginning, the seed of a lot of behavioral disorders. Because what happens is the kid says, I don't understand this. And the teacher says, Johnny, we just went over this and I just explained this. And the kid says, okay, I still don't understand it. So the teacher explains it again. And the kid thinks, it's not that I wasn't listening. I heard what you said. I just didn't understand it. It didn't make sense the first time you explained it that way. It's not going to make sense the second time you explain it that way. Or we say, this is not, I taught this to you. And the fact that you don't understand it, you're going to stay in at recess and you can work on it then. And the kid thinks, listen, you old bat, I'm trying here, and I shouldn't be punished for not. So what they say is, I'm not going to ask any more questions. I'm not. And what you hear from these kids a lot of times is, and their perception is, my teacher doesn't like me, which is just heartbreaking, right? Because when a kid feels like my teacher doesn't like me, they feel like I can't please them. And kids love to please. They love to please. They love to feel like, oh, you've made me happy. I love how hard you've worked. I'm so proud of you. And if a kid feels like they can't get that, then what's the point in trying? So what happens is we start this. And like I said, that's really that seed a lot of times of behavioral disorders is 3rd or 4th grade. And they go, I can't do this work. I can't please you. You're not going to be happy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit over here and I'm going to tear my paper up and I'm going to, poke Brian with a pencil and do things until you send me to the principal's office. And now I'm out of the situation and I feel less stress, less anxiety, right? Even though you would think you would be more anxiety, for that kid, it's less anxiety because I'm out of the classroom. And they go, oh, but now we've created a cycle now where the kid goes, oh, so here's what I do. I tell you, I don't like you. You say, I don't like you either. You kick me out of the classroom. You send me to the principal. I get a free day out of school. Right? This is a great system. And I'm going to keep using this system right on into middle school. So then about in middle school is when we start to identify those kids for alternative. Then we start to say, and an alternative is where, so 6th grade, end elementary is where you start to see alternative school programs for kids. Middle school, high school, certainly we have alternative programs. And this is where we start to see not just some special ed kids, but even typical kids who go, they're just not functioning, right? Again, the gap grows wider. That gap is really the driving force a lot of times behind behaviors. So I want to know why a kid doesn't want to go to school. I don't want to go to school because I read on a 3rd grade level and I don't want you to ask me to read in front of everybody. And I don't know how to do this work. And I don't feel like I'm ever going to be able to know how to do this work. So I don't care. And it's this instant protective defensiveness that they have that they sort of put up. And I don't care. I don't want to care. And you have to find a way to break through that, to talk to them and to say, I think you really do care. And in talking to them too, explaining to them, you are a victim of this system as well, and that it's not your fault. Oftentimes when I talk to kids and I first meet them, and I'll tell them, if I sit down with you and I teach you something and you really try, but you don't get it, whose job is it to take next steps? Who should do something next?
And the answer is?
And they always say, it's my job. And I go, that's the lie we've taught you. That's the lie we've taught you. We have taught you that it's your job to do something next. But the truth is, it's my job. I'm the teacher. It's my job to say to you, this is a pen. And you go, I don't know what that means. And I go, this is a pen. And you go, I don't know what that means. And I go, this is a pen. And you go, oh, that makes sense, Kortni, right? I don't just repeat my instruction. I find different ways. I'm going to do I got 14 dances for you, my friend. That's the nature of a special ed teacher. That didn't make sense. I got another way to teach it to you. And I have a different way. I have 4 ways to teach it to you until you make sense. But if you don't get it, that's not your fault. And did it ever occur to you that maybe you're not bad at math? Maybe you just had a horrible math teacher. And the look on their face is always like, no, that never occurred to me. But That's an intriguing thought. And I'm like, right. So I think maybe somewhere deep within you is an elite scholar. And I always, I do too. I probably shouldn't say this on my podcast, but I always lie to my students and I say, I've looked at your testing. And your testing tells me you're extraordinarily bright. And so you're above average. So I was like, this is an IQ and you're above average. So you should be able to do all these things. And, oh, really? Uh-huh. Yeah. So you should be extraordinarily bright. So the testing tells me that you're extraordinarily bright. So you should be able to do all this. So you'll be able to do all this. So here's our plan. And we make a plan. How much do you think you can improve your reading? So I'm going to test you in your reading. And I'm always very honest with them. I explain to them how scoring works. And I tell them, has anyone ever shown you your scoring? You've been given lots of tests. Nope, nobody's ever shown. Okay, I'm going to show you. You read at a 3.8. Okay, you're a 7th grader. It's the 3rd month of school, so you should be at 7.3. So you read at 3.8. That's pretty low, right? So how much do you think we can do, right? Do you think you can gain 2 years in the 3 months that we have? I think you can. Right. And here's how we're going to do it. So we lay out a plan for how to get it done. And my kids are excited to test at the end of the year, at the end of the semester, because they're like, I'm so excited to see how much I've gained, Miss Kortni. Like, right. And I've had kids. I had a kid who came in and tested at 3rd grade and after 2 years left at 12.9. Right. Wow. So those gains are possible with kids, but it requires just a belief that it is possible and someone there to say, I think you can do it.
Yeah, you're setting the expectation for success.
Absolutely.
For fail.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
So, Kortni, what would you say are some of the unique challenges that you face as a special ed or alternative teacher?
I think one of my biggest unique challenges I face is working with other teachers. I struggle a lot of times to really have other teachers understand, particularly that these students are super capable and that they can do it. But that you simply have to approach them differently, and that you need to approach them with some kindness and some empathy. And it's all in the approach of how I'm going to talk to someone. So I deal with some of the roughest kids that we have, and a lot of our kids come out of juvenile detention. They come out of mental health facilities. And we have some violent offenders. We have some former sex offenders. So we have kids that have issues. And I think that one of the challenges is just getting those other adults that work with them to understand that and to say, look, this kid really needs someone to give them a chance. And they need some structure and they need some consistency and they need someone who believes in them and who formulates a plan with them. I think that's the biggest thing that our kids don't have is hope. And that's what they need someone to give them is to say, this is possible. And I know it's possible. I tell my students all the time, I'm not somebody who was super successful in school and I made it through, and it is possible to do it. And, I spent time myself in detention facilities, and Miss Kortni made a bunch of bad choices when she was young. And I understand, right? I understand what it is to sit in those facilities and to think, I'm never going to get out. My life is ruined, but it is possible to make different choices and to have a different life. And so it's really disheartening. I had a student today tell me that she said one of her teachers told her to shut her pie hole. And I said, oh my gosh, I can't believe that an adult would say that's completely inappropriate for an adult to say to you. And she goes, well, I don't really know how she meant it. And I go, I don't know that there's any appropriate way to mean that. And again, just for those kids, an affirmation of that's not appropriate. I need you to hear very loud and clear. That is not an appropriate way for an adult to speak to. That's not an appropriate way for anybody to speak to anybody, but especially not appropriate for an adult to speak to a child like that. That's not appropriate. You didn't deserve that. How about that? And I need you to hear that loud and clear. You didn't deserve that. Don't care what you were doing. Don't care what was happening at the moment. That's the adult's job to keep in control of themselves. And they didn't, sounds like it. And so I struggle. And I know these kids are frustrating. I know they can be trying. But again, part of our job as adults is to take a deep breath and to remember that we're the ones in control and we're supposed to be modeling and leading. And ultimately, at the end of the day, these kids look to us for that hope.
It sounds to me like you provide your students some hope on the basis of your own background. You're a living model that, you can go through these things and still come out on the other side and be very successful. And I know you're successful because you've been named Teacher of the Year how many times?
I have been named Teacher of the Year twice for our district.
Congratulations.
Within my school, and I made it once for our district, district-wide, and then I've gone on to state as a state finalist. So yeah, thank you.
Can I ask you a question? I've been asking you questions all along. What would you say has changed from the time when you started as a special ed to now? And I'm not thinking just in terms of the culture and the school system, but what have you learned and what have you gained and what makes you a better teacher now?
So partly there has been a shift in the culture. And I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but we used to serve kids categorically. So what that meant was we had kids that you went to the behavioral disorder room, and this kid went to the cognitively impaired room, and this kid went to the learning disabilities classroom, and never the twain shall meet. And then at some point, we changed systems. Rather than serving kids categorically, we said, good teaching is good teaching. And so the teaching that is good for a kid with a mild disability, regardless of the category, is good for all kids within that. So we disperse with the categories and we serve kids by a severity instead. So we say mild, moderate, or severe, profound, which is a whole different theory. The effect, though, that it had really on me because it forced me, first of all, and I remember in college, I was really one of those, we were small. I think there was 7 of us in our graduating class of special ed. I was the only teacher that was interested in doing emotional behavioral disorders. Everybody else there was interested in learning disabilities or cognitive impairments. And, but I knew, like, this is what I really, really wanted to do. And at the time, you were required to receive your certifications in multiple areas. So you were multiple, and it was really out of my field of expertise. I'd say, oh my gosh, this is not really what I know how to do. But as I have grown over the years, I would say I do agree with that. I think to a certain extent, good teaching can be good teaching. And I think regardless of the disabilities that you have in a classroom, I think you can find ways to serve kids regardless of the disability. So having taught in those classrooms where I have multiple disabilities in the classroom, I think it is possible to bring them together and serve them. So that my attitude on that, I think, has changed.
That's a great answer. Thank you. So let's say that I'm a parent and I have a child that I know is either might benefit from an alternative education setting or a special education setting. What do I, as a parent, do to, help the school get better resources for my child?
Sure. So the first step, if you suspect your child has a learning disability or is in need of special education services, the first step is a request for services. So I would highly recommend that you put this in writing. So when I did this for my own son, I simply, it doesn't have to be grand. It just simply said, my name is Kortni Torralba. I'm requesting a special education evaluation for my son and for speech services. and sent that to the special education department of the district that we live in. And they are required within a certain amount of days to respond and to test your child. So, my recommendation is, and they are technically required to do that even if you verbally notify them. However, if you verbally notify them, what they can say is, "Oh, I don't remember that you said that," or "I don't," or yeah. So always put it in writing. An alternative school, it's just an application. So oftentimes you apply an interview to get into the alternative school. I mean, if you think it'd be a good fit for your child, I encourage you to go check it out. See whatever the alternative school program is for your district. Interview with it. Look around. Talk to the teachers. Talk to the other students if you're able to. Let them, see if this is a good fit for your kiddo. But both of those are accessible. It really is parent driven. You've got to go in there and say, I need these services for my kid.
So let's say that a parent is single, but they do want to get their child in a special ed program or an alternative. Earlier in the conversation, you said they should always bring someone with them. And typically that would be a co-parent. But in a situation where there's not a co-parent, do you have any tips or who should they bring?
So you can always, the person that you bring doesn't have to necessarily be an expert qualified. There again, it's just somebody that's an expert on your child as well. So this could be a family friend or a relative. But I also, there's lots of great parent organizations out there as well, Pro Oklahoma, that will send an advocate with you. Free of charge. So again, this is utilizing other parents. So if you are able to connect with another parent who maybe also has a child with a similar disability, who can lend a supportive ear, that knows, who's also been through the process, that can be very, very helpful.
What are some of the biggest misconceptions about the students who attend these kinds of programs?
I'm so glad you asked that. The biggest misconception I hear a lot of times when we talk with parents about their child attending, going into special ed or especially alternative ed schools is, I don't want my kid to go there. That's where the bad kids go. And we couldn't be further from the truth. The reality is that this is really what I tell people is this is really where kids who need some extra help go. But these kids are just like the kids. These are the same kids that you have out there in the regular high school. It's just that these kids are getting some extra help. Because what you find is oftentimes, and I really want to let these parents know particularly, because I know that oftentimes you can feel as a parent that you feel like you're not doing enough, that I'm just not enough. I don't have the skills. I talked with a dad several months recently who had been sober for a few months. And he said to me, I'm just not doing well at this parenting thing. And I said, "Oh, you're rocking it, right? I mean, first of all, you're still here, right? You're showing up. You're still here. You're sober. You're trying, right? That's the most you could do." And he said, "I really think I need some parenting classes." And I said, "Well, we've got those in spades, friend. And look at you with the effort to try." I said, and he goes, "Do you think it's too late for me?" And I go, "Oh, friend, it's never too late." I said, "I took parenting classes and I'm an adult with a master's degree. It's never too late, right? We're never too late to talk and learn and share with others." Because I think the thing that we think a lot of times is, I'm horrible at this, right? I don't know what I'm doing. And it feels like everyone else is so competent at it. But the reality is we're all floundering. And so it's really important as parents to reach out to other parents to know this is a tough job. And what we're doing is really hard. And you're doing the best you can, right? I don't think there are any easy answers sometimes with parents. And for them to know that there's someone in your corner, I think is really, really important. I think having this idea that again that we're a team and a lot of that, and I had to say a lot of that unfortunately is school driven. It really depends on the teachers that you deal with and the administration that you deal with. It can make a big difference. But the best thing is to come and to say, I want, I mean, teachers for the most part, they want to help your kiddo, right? They're particularly that special ed teacher. They want what's in the best interest of your kid, hopefully. And the idea there is to come to them and say, how can we make a plan? Let's work together. I was one of those special ed teachers that was in real contact with my parents. My parents had my cell phone number. I would call each week and have a great update, good, bad, ugly. How are things going on at home? Regardless of your disability, we just chatted, to say, because again, that whole child approach, it wasn't to me to say, it doesn't do any good to me if I say, well, the kid has all A's and B's. Like, okay, but he's not sleeping very well at night, Miss Kortni, and he doesn't really have any friends, and he's cries a lot. And, oh, well, then, so is he doing really well? No. Does he have A's and B's? Yeah, but it doesn't sound to me like he's doing very well, right? So it's really important that you discuss and talk about the whole child and everything that's involved. But yeah, that approach I think is really important. That you come with this idea of what can we do for this kiddo, and don't be afraid. I think either as a parent to say, I want to talk. I don't just want to talk about his grades. I don't just want to talk about that. I want to talk about everything with my kiddo, with this stuff, especially with mental health in today's day and age. I think it's really important that we talk about whether or not my child is happy. Is my child happy? Are they content? Right? Because I don't, it's not in my interest either to raise a kid that has an A and B and then, goes home and kills himself. That nobody is served by that. It is important that we look at the whole kid and say, how is it that we can make sure that we are serving the whole child.
Right. Kortni, you have been a delightful guest.
Thank you, friend.
Let me ask you, is there anything else that you would like to share or talk about that I haven't asked about?
I just want to tell your parents what great courage I think they have in taking the time to listen to this podcast and to this video, and taking the time to improve and work on themselves as parents, and good for you. And I think that it speaks a great deal to a testament of your character. So kudos to you.
Our guest today has been Kortni Torralba, who is a special ed and alternative education teacher at MAST, which is the More Alternative School and Treatment. This is the Forge Your Trail podcast. The Forge Your Trail is a program made possible through a grant from Adult and Family Services and through Oklahoma Child Support Services. Our mission is to provide educational resources and support services for Oklahoma parents with a focus on helping fathers improve their relationship with their children. We also teach a parenting class called On My Shoulders that's free of charge for participants. To learn more about our program and upcoming class sessions, please visit our website at forgeyourtrail.com. Thank you all very much.